area. So when we talk about area, we're talking about the space inside a closed figure. Okay, so generally we talk about figures that are regular, but the general meaning doesn't have to relate to a regular shape. Area is what is inside a figure. Another kind of question we could have would be the opposite. If the area of a square is 25 meters squared, what is the length? Okay, so sometimes you're asked to go backwards. In any case, you should always put your formula, because then you can plug in what you know and it'll be easier. Here we know the area is 25 meters squared and we're looking for the side. Well, how do you get rid of a square? You do the square root. So you do the square root of both sides. This side will give you the side, which is what you want, and the square root of 25 meters squared is 5 meters. Next we have area of a rectangle. Now, in elementary school, you might have used the language length times width. In high school, however, we're going to use a different terminology because it's going to apply to most of the other polygons. So instead of length times width, then it's possible you could still see this vocabulary in your book. We're going to use base, which will always be the one that it's sitting on, times height, which will always be the one perpendicular to the base. So instead, we have base times height, or base times height. So the area of a rectangle equals base times height. Example. If I have a rectangle and I know that the height is 7 decimeters and the base is 2 decimeters, then the area of my rectangle equals base times height, 2 decimeters times 7 decimeters equals 14 decimeters squared. And don't forget the decimeters is squared. Another example, if I have 9 decameters by 3 decameters, I use my same formula, base times height. I have 9 decameters times 3 decameters, and I end up with 27 decameters squared. So let's look at an example of a word problem. It's not always going to be just calculate the area. Sometimes it's going to ask you for the reverse. So the area of a rectangle is 48 meters squared. Its base is 8 meters. What is its height? So I always start by putting down my formula. Area of a rectangle equals base times height. Here, I'm given the area and I'm given the base. And what I'm looking for is the height. Well, I know that I have to isolate for the h, and the best way to do that is to get rid of the 8 meters squared. How do I get rid of it? I divide this side by 8 meters. But whatever I do that to this side, because of the equality, I have to do to the other side. So I divide the other side by 8 meters. What I'm left over here with is my height, and then I just divide 48 meters squared by 8 meters, and I'm left with 6 meters as the height. Let's look at another example. Let's say I'm given a rectangle with a base of 1.5 centimeters and a length of 20 millimeters, and I'm asked the area of this rectangle in centimeters squared and in decimeters squared. Okay, so for A, I'm asked for it in centimeters. I have to check to make sure both are in centimeters, and as we can see, this is not in centimeters. So I have to convert it first. So I have the area of my rectangle is base times height. But when I put in my base times my height, I see that they are not the same unit, and I can't continue until I change one of them into the unit of the other. And then because in this case I'm asked for centimeters, I'm going to change the millimeters into centimeters. So that's 2 centimeters. So I have 1.5 centimeters times 2 centimeters, and that's going to give me 3 centimeters squared. Now, for question B, I'm asked to find the answer in decimeters, and some people might feel inclined to just say, well, there's a difference of 10 between centimeters and decimeters, and I'm going from centimeters to decimeters. So from small to big, divide the pig, and it's 10. So my answer should be 3 centimeters divided by 10, which is 0.3. But this, in fact, is wrong. Okay, and I'll show you why. If you actually were to do it out, but converting at the beginning, you would see that 1.5 centimeters becomes 0.15 decimeters, and 20 millimeters becomes 0.2 decimeters. Having done this conversion, then I would say area of my rectangle is base times height, which is 0.15 decimeters times 0.2 decimeters, and that gives me 0.03 decimeters squared. So I haven't actually divided it by 10. I've divided it by 10 squared, which is 100. And because that can seem confusing to people, I always suggest that you do the conversions before you do your calculations, because otherwise you have to remember that it's not just the factor of how different it is, the jumps, the 1 times 10, it's that amount of jumps squared if you're doing area, and then cubed if you're doing volume. So it's best to keep it simple and do the conversions beforehand.